gmail.com. Ay, nako. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, Chef.
Okay. 10
Yes, Chef.
chapters. Yeah, 10 chapters to. Kalahati ngayon, kalahati bukas. And we also have film showing. Kailan exam nyo?
This Saturday po, Chef.
Saturday po.
Sige, mabuti yon. Teka ha. Sayang yung 1 oras eh. Okay, start na tayo. Meron na kayong handouts? Wala.
May binigay po, Chef.
Binigay po siya.
Yung bang handouts nyo, ito, pareho sila. Tingnan nyo nga. Ito ba yan, class? Dalawa kasi yung PowerPoint ko eh. Tingnan nyo nga. Para kung yung isa, yun ang bubuksan ko. Pareho lang naman ang content, kaya lang baka ibang presentation. Sabihin nyo lang kung ito. Sabihin nyo kung yan yung binigay sa inyo. Makikita naman nyo kasi iba ang iba ang, teka, pakita ko yung isa. Ito yung isa. Ito yung isa. Which of the two?
Yung pangalawa, Chef.
Hindi ito class.
Hindi,
Hindi
Chef.
po. Yung second po.
Ito.
Yes,
Ito.
Yes,
Yes,
Chef.
Chef.
Okay, so hindi nyo na kailangang mag-kopya, hindi nyo na kailangan mag-screenshot, basta mag-explain lang ako. I'll try to finish 5 chapters today, and then we will continue with 5 chapters tomorrow. Okay? Let's start. Are we ready?
Okay, Chef.
Okay, Chef.
Yes,
Okay, so there are 10 chapters. Itong chapter 1 natin, ang title niya, Providing Safe Food. Class, kaninang lunch, alauna ng madaling araw dyan, alauna ng hapon dito. May inatenan akong webinar where ang speakers namin, yun talagang mga servsafe biggies. Sila yung mga people at the back of servsafe, sila yung matataas ang position, sila yung mga knowledgeable sa food service industry. And then, meron silang mga updates, meron silang mga highlights ng mga changes, which I will integrate in the lecture that I'm giving you today. And ito yung pinaka-recent. Ang title kasi ng webinar namin kanina is how to approach food safety and food hygiene during pandemic. And now that almost over na ang pandemic, what are the changes that we expect to see Lalo na ngayon, almost nagno-normalize na ang situation. People are going back to the streets. So, ano yung nakikita natin mga changes? Kasi daw yung during the pandemic, which is more than 2 years, it's 2 years and a half now, during the pandemic, bumaba ang cases ng food poisoning. So, hindi masyadong na-compromise ang food safety kasi unang-una, nakamask tayo lahat, hindi tayo lumalabas sa bahay, so medyo okay siya. Ngayon, na medyo nagno-normalize na situation, nakikita nila na tumataas na naman ang cases ng food poisoning. So that is what we are going to discuss within the 2 days of training. Okay? So the first chapter is providing safe food. So ibig sabihin nun, ano ba yung mga factors na dapat nating i-consider to make sure na safe ang pagkain na papakain natin sa ating mga clients. Kasi class, feeding people which are not related to you, feeding people that pay for the food that you serve them is different from just feeding your family at home. Iba rin yun sa nagpapakain ka sa party. Iba yung liability mo kapag ka yung pagkain na pinakakain mo, binibenta mo. Of course, two-way to eh. You expect to get something in return, like you're going to make money, kikita ka. But the people who are buying your food, who are eating your food, they expect, aside from masarap na food, maganda plating, syempre number one, in-expect nila na yung pagkain mo ay safe. And we owe them that. We have to give them that. Kasi nagbabayad sila eh. Source of income mo yun eh. And that's the particular reason why you are enrolled in a culinary school, is because most of you would like to either put up your own food business or work in the food service industry. Dito sa America class, napapansin ko, mas mahigpit sila. Dito, napakahigpit nila sa food safety. Kasi unang-una, number one, the resources are all here. Pangalawa, dito wala silang pake kahit na magtapon. Basta lumampas na yan ng 1 day o kahit 1 hour lang, past expiration, wala silang pake magtapon. Hindi sila nagre-recycle ng leftover. Sa Philippines, in my experience, I have been in the food service industry in the Philippines for, bago ko malis, 12 years. Napapansin ko dyan, ang hirap kasing magtapon. Kaya, dyan sa atin, masyadong popular yung tinatawag na recycling, lalo na sa mga karinderya. Whatever leftover they have for the day, kung hindi man nila kayang ipakain na lang sa pamilya sa gabi, yung alam nilang hindi naman sira would be recycled into another dish for tomorrow. A good example class, hindi na lang karinderya, yung mga tindera sa palengke. If they have leftover pork, they'd make langgonisa, they'd make tocino, para imbes na uulamin sa bahay where they're not making money, magiging source of income pa nila yun. That's the difference between America and the Philippines. Dito, na-afford nila magtapon. Kasi, na-afford nila bumili. Mas affordable ang pagkain dito. Kumbaga, as long as you are working, as long as you are earning, you can afford to buy, no? Hindi kagaya dyan sa atin masyado, lalo na ngayon, no, after pandemic, tumaas ang baboy, tumaas lahat. Mas kailangan tayo maging prudent o mas careful tayo sa mga leftover natin. Okay. This is one question that was raised in the webinar which I attended this morning. There was a question raised by a participant like, tayo kasi class, like ako, dun sa work ko, kapag ka alam namin nagagamitin yung karne, it could be pork, it could be beef, it could be chicken, it could be fish, hindi na namin fini-freeze. Kasi ang pinag-uusapan natin dito, volume. Like how much? As much as 30 pounds. So that would be roughly around 15 kilos. Okay? So kapag naka-freeze ang 15 kilos or 30 pounds ng karne, tapos the best way to thaw kasi is kung volume na ganito, ilalagay mo siya sa fridge where it will remain safe. Tayo sa bahay, okay lang yon. Isang kilong baboy, i-adobo ko bukas. So ibababa ko from the freezer, lalagay ko sa fridge. In 24 hours, matotoo na yan. Lalambot na yan, ready to cook na yan. Pero kung ang pinag-uusapan natin, 30 pounds or 15 kilos, hindi kaya ng isang araw plus. Normally yan, umaabot 3 araw. So kaya kami, yung pagkain namin for the week, kasi sa ano ako nag-work, I think I mentioned to you, nursing home, I am feeding 140 residents breakfast, lunch, dinner. Walang problema sa breakfast. Kasi mga bacon yan, mga sausage, walang problema. We're talking of lunch and dinner. So ang ginagawa ng mga kusinero ko, nagpe-prep sila 2 days ahead para hindi sila nagagahol. So ibig sabihin, kung magpe-prep sila ng 2 days ahead, yung iluluto nila, today is Wednesday. So dyan, Thursday na. So let's say Thursday ngayon. Yung lulutuin ko for Friday, yung ipe-prep ko for Friday, kailangan ilabas ko na ngayon. Ilalagay ko sa fridge. It is safe. It is safe. We will talk about temperatures later. Ngayon, servsafe said, you can keep food safe in the fridge. Ang tawag nila dito, cooler. In the fridge for at least a maximum of 7 days. Huwag lang lalampas ng 7 araw. So, ibig sabihin, kung meron kang, halimbawa, sikip ang freezer mo, hindi mo mapagkasya lahat ng karne mo sa freezer o manok. Huwag lang isda klasa, medyo nakakompromise ako sa isda. Manok, baboy, baka. Okay? At lulutuin mo naman. Lulutuin mo naman sa loob ng 7 araw. It is safe to keep it in the fridge. It is safe kung puno ang freezer mo. But you have to cook it within the 7 days or not beyond 7 days. That's the latest that we have learned from servsafe. Ngayon, nabanggit ko sa inyo kanina na ang isa sa challenges na hinaharap natin ngayon na bumabalik na sa normal ang buhay natin. So on the rise na naman ang factors that can lead to food poisoning or food contamination. The best weapon ever to combat or to prevent food poisoning is personal hygiene. So ang pinag-uusapan natin sa personal hygiene, bukod sa paggamit ng hairnet, is hand washing. Always hand washing. Now, if you're going to ask me, how many times do I have to wash my hands when I am cooking? Every time that you feel you touch something that's not clean, you have to wash your hands. Maraming beses ka maghugas ng kamay. It doesn't matter. And gloves can never be used in exchange of hand washing. Ang kahalagahan kasi ni class ng paggamit ng gloves ay kung mag-handle ka ng ready-to-eat food. Pero bago mo isuot ang gloves mo, pag magagawa kang sandwich, maghihiwa ka ng fruits and salads, vegetables for salads, you have to wash your hands first, dry them, and then put on your gloves. That's very, very important. But you cannot replace gloves. You cannot replace hand washing with gloves. You cannot replace hand washing with a hand sanitizer. Although maganda na pagkatapos mo maghugas ng kamay, magsasanitizer ka, magka-gloves ka, pinakamaganda yun. Okay? So that is the latest that I have learned today. So there are many objectives of this chapter. Number 1, we will have to recognize why is food safety important. Number 2, when does food become unsafe? Or another word for unsafe is contaminated. Number 3, ano ba yung mga TCS food? I will discuss that to you later. At ano yung ready to eat? Number 4, ano yung risk factors for a foodborne illness? And number 5, what are the important measures that we can use to prevent, to keep food safe? Okay, first in the agenda, let us identify the meaning of the words foodborne illness. Illness, alam niyo sa Tagalog, sakit. Sakit, foodborne, na nanggaling sa pagkain. So, nagkasakit ang isang tao dahil meron siyang kinain na pagkain na may microorganisms. Yun ang simple definition niya sa Tagalog. So, nagkukos ng mga nararamdaman niya, nagsusuka siya, nagtatay siya, nahihilo siya, ay dahil sa may kinain siyang pagkain na contaminated o madumi. Okay. Foodborne illness ang tawag doon. Ngayon, kapag isang tao lang ang nagkasakit, dahil meron siyang kinain na pagkain na contaminated, that's what you call foodborne illness. Pero pag more than 1, 2, 3, or more, at parehong pagkain ang kinain nila, let's say both of them ate egg salad. So kumain sila pareho ng egg salad. Pagkatapos sila kumain ng egg salad, nagtai sila, nagsuka sila, nahilo sila. Okay? Hindi pa rin conclusive yun, ha? Tapos, nagtai sila, nagsuka sila, nagpunta sila sa ospital, nagkaroon ng mga test. Normally, pagka ganyan, ang tinetest, stool. So, nagpa-stool analysis yung dalawa. Lumabas na salmonella yung dahilan ng kanilang pagsusuka. At yung salmonella, nakuha nila dun sa nilagang itlog. So kapag ganon, na based on laboratory findings, tapos both display symptoms, tapos both ate the same food, that is what you call an outbreak. It could be, like, dati meron akong alam na graduation party. Nabalita to. Graduation ng isang public school sa Manila. So ngayon, nag-order yung school ng egg sandwiches sa isang caterer. And there were about 400 graduating students. So ngayon, dahil maraming sandwiches yung ginawa ng caterer, she made the sandwiches in advance. Tapos yung balot ng sandwiches na, yung sandwich bag na plastic, doon niya nilagay. Tapos yung sandwiches nilagay niya sa malaking plastic container, may takip. Tapos nilagay niya sa kotse niya. Ang masama dyan, yung kotse niya, iniwanan niya sa ilalim ng init ng araw. Okay man lang sana kung binaba niya yung container, inalisan niya ng takip, tapos may electric fan man lang o may aircon, hindi. Bukod pa doon, ang haba ng oras na nagstay yung sandwich sa loob ng plastic container under the heat of the sun. So tapos, after graduation, the children were given a sandwich each. And all the children who ate the sandwiches were hospitalized. Salmonella. Wala namang namatay, but they were all hospitalized. So that's a risk factor. That is an outbreak. Mas nakakatakot ang outbreak sa illness. Kasi illness isang tao lang. Okay? Pag outbreak, hindi mo madedenay. Buong barangay yan. It's a group of people. Okay. Now, maraming factors ang kailangan mo i-consider kapag nagtayo ka ng negosyo sa food business. Actually, class, pinakamahirap na negosyo ang food. Pero pinakamalaki ang kita. Mas madali pang beauty parlor, o kaya boutique, mas madali. Kasi class, ang daming risk factors. Unang-una, bukod pa sa dapat masarap, dapat malinis, dapat wala kang malalason. Kasi bukod pa sa madedemanda ka, magkakaubusan ng pera, masisira reputation mo. That's why, to be able to be successful in terms of food safety, there are many challenges that we should face kapag naging food service, kapag naging entrepreneur ka in the line of food service. Number one, time and money. These are challenges because when you say time and money, you have to devote time for training and money. Like if you want them to attend servsafe, this is money. Language and culture. Iba-ibang bansa, may iba-ibang kultura. And if you train people, you have also to consider the culture. Like may mga bansa na like sa Japan, okay lang na maingay kumain. Yung mga ganon, di ba? Like in the Philippines, we eat with our hands and there are some countries who will not allow that. Literacy and education, pathogens, ito yung mga microorganism na nanggagaling sa food na kapag pumasok sa katawan, nagpo-produce ng lason, which we call toxin. Okay, the proliferation of unapproved suppliers, ito yung matetempt ka kasi may mga suppliers na walang papeles pero mura. And if you want to make more money, you'd go for them. High-risk customers, hindi mo naman sila pwede taboy. Ito yung mga taong either hindi pa nade-develop ang immunization o mahina na ang immunization. At saka staff turnover. Mahirap ang staff turnover class. Kasi kung na-train mo na tapos may bago kang tao, you have to do training again. Okay? Okay, ano ba yung mga problems na usually na-face natin kapag nagkaroon ng foodborne illness in the operation? Number one, pwede ka mawala ng customers. Siyempre, pag nawalan ka ng customers, wala kang benta. Number two, lalo na kung pinasara yung facility mo, masisira ang reputation mo. Number three, of course, alam mo naman ngayon, may social media na tayo. Madaling kumalat sa Facebook, sa Instagram, and everything else. Tapos nun, ang staff mo, bababa ang moral. Pag bumaba ang moral niyan, hindi na sila papasok. Okay? Tapos, demandahan. Pag nandemanda ka, tatas ang insurance mo, tapos magastos yan kasi kung magpapalit ka ng tao, you have to retrain. So, lose-lose. Walang win-win. It's a lose-lose situation. Now, ano ba yung dapat nating bantayan? Okay? Tatlo. Okay? May tatlong sources ng contamination. Ito yung tinatawag nating biological contaminants, chemical contaminants, and physical contaminants. There are 4 biological contaminants: bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi. I will be discussing that one by one. Chemical contaminants, we have cleaners, sanitizers, and polishes. And physical hazards, we have metal shavings, staples, bandages, glass, dirt, and natural objects. Okay. So when does food become unsafe? Ano ba yung mga dapat nating bantayan? Number one, food will become unsafe if we do not screen very well our suppliers. Kasi class, may mga factors na i-consider kapag pipili ka ng suppliers. Hindi yan presyo-presyo. Pangalawa lang yung presyo-presyo. Pero of course, credibility is very important. Number two, we have to train and we have to get trained and train our cooks on how to cook food correctly. Hindi lang basta nakagisa ka, okay na. It's different when you're cooking at home than when you're cooking for a group of people. Number three, kung buffet, we have to learn about the holding temperatures. Number four, about the use of contaminated equipment. Yung sa bahay kasi kung minsan babalawan mo lang ng tubig, pwede na yan. Pero in a large facility, kailangan hindi contaminated yung ginagamit ng equipment. And most importantly of them all, personal hygiene. It's very important. Okay. These are the factors that lead to food becoming unsafe. Time temperature abuse, I will discuss that to you later. Cross-contamination, poor personal hygiene, poor cleaning and sanitizing. Okay. Time temperature abuse muna tayo. Ano yung tinatawag na time temperature abuse? Time temperature abuse, class, ay nangyayari time temperature abuse happens when food stays long at a certain temperature, kaya ang mga microorganisms ay tumutubo. Okay. Ano yung temperature na tinatawag natin? Okay? Ang temperature na tinatawag natin ay temperature danger zone. Ano yung temperature danger zone? Ito yung temperature sa pagitan ng 41 degrees at 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Ito ay ang tinatawag na temperature danger zone. Kapag ang pagkain mo ay nahinto o napirme o inilagay mo sa temperature na pagitan ng 41 at 135 ng 4 na oras o higit pa, magsisimula ng tumubo ang microorganisms. Actually, microorganisms start to grow on the 4th hour. Pero yung 1 to less than 4, safe ang pagkain mo. Kahit nasa temperature danger zone pa yan. Nagiging delikado lang yan kapag nandun siya sa 41 to 135 pagsampa ng 4 na oras. Okay, ano ba yung 41? Ang pagkain below 41, hindi tutubuan ng microorganisms. It is safe. At kapag ang pagkain ay nasa 135 pataas, hindi rin yan tutubuan ng microorganism. So, ibig sabihin, safe yan. Kahit mag-8 oras pa, mag-10 oras, basta 41 and below, at saka 135 and above. Okay. Ano ba yung 41 and below? Ang temperature ng refrigerator, class, ay 41. So, safe yan. Gaya ng sinabi ko, kapag ka nagsosoka ng food, 7 days, safe yan. 41 degrees. Mababa. Yung 5 degrees, pag umabot na ng 5 degrees, yun na ang temperature sa loob ng freezer. Where food can stay longer. Hindi lang 7 days. Okay? Yung 1, okay. So when food is inside the refrigerator, the freezer, down to the freezer, kahit lumampas ng 4 hours yan, safe yan. Or kapag nasa ibabaw yan ng kalan, where the temperature is 135 and above, kahit lumampas ng 4 na oras, okay yan. So yung 41 to 135, anong temperature yon? Yun yung pagkain na nasa ibabaw ng mesa. Walang lamig, walang init. Halimbawa, may tira kang ulam sa tanghali, gusto mo kang kainin sa gabi, ilalagay mo lang sa ilalim ng mesa, sa ibabaw ng mesa. Nagtanghali ka ng alas 12, maghahaponan ka ng alas 7. Ilang oras yung pagitan ng alas 12 sa alas 7? Lalampas ka ng 4 na oras. So, hindi yun pwede. Hindi yun pwede. Kagaya nung practice natin na magsasain ka ng umaga hanggang gabi. Kung gusto mong isang beses ka lang magsasaing, kain ka sa umaga, para hanggang gabi na yon, may 2 kang choice. Number 1, huwag mong patayin yung rice cooker, naka-keep warm mula umaga hanggang gabi. Magtututong naman yung kanin mo. Or number 2, pagkasain mo ng almusal, palamigin mo, i-fridge mo. Para hanggang gabi pwede siya. That's the safest way. Kung magluluto ka ng ulam sa tanghali, Gusto mong ulam hanggang gabi. Pagkakain ng tanghali at malamig na yung ulam, ilagay mo sa fridge, tapos pwede mo initin para sa gabi. Pero hindi pwedeng nasa ibabaw lang. Dahil sa ika-4 na oras at pataas at nasa temperatura lang ng kwarto, that's 41 to 135 ang pagkain mo, then that's the time microorganisms will start to grow. Okay. There are many ways kung kailan natin nako-consider na time, temperature, abuse ang pagkain. Okay, number 1, it has not been held or stored at correct temperatures. Okay, yung ibig sabihin natin ng salitang held, this is applicable class to the buffet. Okay? Alam natin na may mga buffet tayo, like Vikings, like Yaki Mix. Yan nasa tapat ng CIC, Yaki Mix. Okay. Kapag hot food, ang pagkain mo sa buffet, gaya ng kanin, ulam, na luto, dapat nakalagay yan sa chafing dish o sa warmer, where the temperature of the food is always 135 papunta sa taas. Para kahit mag-buffet ka ng more than 4 hours, your food remains safe. At kung may desserts ka na kailangan malamig, so dapat meron kang chiller o kaya nakapatong siya sa yelo where the temperature of your dessert must be 41 degrees and below. So kapag ganon, hindi ka nagta-time temperature abuse. Number 2, your food is not cooked or reheated enough to kill pathogens. I am going to discuss that with you pagdating natin sa thermometer. That's the reason why cooks and chefs must always have a thermometer with them during cooking para alam mo na narating ng pagkain mo ang minimum internal cooking temperature to make them safe. Ibig sabihin, kung may microorganism, patay na yan. And number 3, hindi mo siya pinalamig ng tama bago mo siya tinago sa fridge. Okay. Ang pangalawang cause ng contamination is what we call cross-contamination. Cross means tumawid. Tumawid ang contaminants mula sa isang pagkain, papunta sa kabilang pagkain, mula sa tao, papunta sa pagkain, o mula sa utensil, papunta sa pagkain. Tumatawid ang microorganism. Look at the picture. Sa kanan, meron kang repolyo. Apparently, itong cabbage na to ay gagawing coleslaw. And you do not cook coleslaw. You just cut it thinly and then you put your dressing. Yung nasa kaliwa ng chopping board ay manok, which happens to be the most hazardous of them all. They are sharing a chopping board. So yung mga liquid na nanggagaling sa manok o dugo ay pwedeng tumawid papunta dun sa repolyo na hindi mo nalulutuin because it's ready to eat. So this is cross-contamination. Okay? What are the other forms by which you can have cross-contamination in the kitchen? Like the first example I gave you, itong repolyo at saka manok. Okay? The contaminated ingredients, which is the chicken, combines the liquids, go to the food that will not be cooked anymore. And in this case, you have your coleslaw. Okay. This is also an example of ready-to-eat food. The repolyo is ready to eat. Touches contaminated surfaces. What is the contaminated surface? The chopping board. Okay? Number 3, a food handler touches contaminated food, and then touches ready-to-eat food. Halimbawa, may food handler, yung kusinero. Kukunin niya yung manok, aalisin niya sa chopping board, bare hands. O kahit naka-gloves pa siya. Kukunin niya yung manok, lalagay niya sa titimplahan niya, tapos without changing gloves, kukunin niya yung repolyo, lalagay niya sa bowl para haluan ng dressing. That's cross-contamination. And number 4, contaminated cleaning cloths touch food contact surfaces. Meron kang basahan, pinangpunas mo sa marumi, tapos pamumunas mo sa malinis na surface. Cross-contamination. Okay. Ang pangatlong factor ay poor personal hygiene. Of course, personal hygiene refers to you, the food handler. Ngayon, as you can see in the picture, nagkakamot siya ng kanyang braso. Kaya nga yan kinakamot, meron siyang sugat or meron siyang something on the skin. And he is scratching his arm right in front of the salad that he's making. And he's not wearing gloves. So that's poor personal hygiene that can cause food illness. Another would be failure to wash their hands, most specifically after going to the restroom. Coughing or sneezing on food, touching or scratching wounds like what this drawing is showing you, and then touching food, or coming to work while you're sick. Okay, the fourth cause of contamination, foodborne illness, is poor cleaning and sanitizing. Number 1, the utensils and the equipment that you're using are not properly washed and rinsed and sanitized between uses. Lalo yung iba ginagawa, nilulublub lang sa tubig. That's not cleaning. Number 2, food contact surfaces are wiped clean instead of being washed, rinsed, and sanitized. Halimbawa, may tumulong dugo doon sa work table mo. Punasan mo lang ng basahan, tapos na, hindi. Kasi pang cross-contamination ng dugo, dapat sasabunin mo, babanlawan mo, kasi isprayan mo ng sanitizing solution. Number 3, wiping cloths are not stored in a sanitizer solution. May papakita akong picture sa inyo mamaya. Sa food service industry, meron tayong tinatawag na mga buckets. Ang common na nakikita kong bucket, color red, tsaka color green. May sanitizing solution na laman yan sa loob. Doon mo ilalagay yung mga sanitizing cloth mo after use to make sure that microorganisms are killed. And then number 4, the sanitizer solution was not prepared correctly. Kasi meron niyang tinatawag na strength. It should be strong enough to destroy microorganisms. Okay. May dalawang klase ng pagkain na high risk for food poisoning. Number 1 is TCS food. T stands for time and temperature, C stands for control, and S stands for safety. Ito yung mga pagkain in simple layman's term, hazardous. Ito yung mga pagkain na madaling tubuan ng microorganisms that can cause foodborne illness. And number 2, ready to eat. Ibig sabihin, ito yung mga pagkain na kakainin na lang. Wala ka nang gagawin pa. So, dapat malinis sila. Okay. Ngayon, yung TCS food class requires controlling of time. Time is, we're talking of 4 hours. And temperature control. Ang pinag-uusapan nating temperature ay 41 to 135. Ibig sabihin, ito yung mga pagkain na hindi pwedeng tumagal ng higit na 4 na oras sa temperature na 41 to 135. At ito yung mga pagkain na yan. Dairy. Pamilya ng gatas. Milk, cream, and cheese. madali rin silang masira. That's why they should always be refrigerated. Yung nakikita niyong keso sa picture ay ang tanging keso lang na pinapayagan nating may amag or molds. And this is blue cheese. All the other cheeses cannot have molds. Kapag ang keso mo ay may amag na, dapat tinatapon na. Because molds is also one cause of foodborne illness. Eggs. Kaya ang mga itlog, dahil nasa shells yan ang shells plus porous. Ibig sabihin ng porous, may mga butas. Nakakapasok ang air. Yan ang dahilan kaya naluluma ang itlog kapag hindi mo tinago sa fridge. So, eggs must always be refrigerated. Plus, dito sa Amerika, may tinatawag na eggs sa Tetra Pak. But they are also refrigerated, lalo na pag nabuksan na. Merong naka-Tetra Pak na whole eggs, yolk and white. Merong egg yolks lang. Meron namang egg whites lang. So, mas mahaba ang buhay ng mga eggs na nasa Tetra boxes. Karne, baboy, baka, lamb, whatever karne you eat. Poultry. In fact, poultry is number 1. Manok, turkey, geese, duck, whatever. Fish and shellfish. So, kasama dito lahat ng tahong, tulya, talaba, clams, hipon, lobster, crabs. Kasama yan. Potatoes that have been cooked already. Pero kapag ang patatas ay hilaw pa, it's okay. Pero kapag ang patatas ay luto na, it should be kept in the refrigerator for not more than 7 days. Cooked rice. O yan, sinabi ko na sa inyo ha. Ang cooked rice, kailangan kapag luto na ang kanin, hindi mo palalampasin ng 4 hours sa temperature danger zone. Pero kung bigas yan, kahit matagal yan, pwede. Ngayon, ganito ang pinapayo ko sa nagluluto ng kanin for a group. Halimbawa, sa restaurant, kung magkakaroon kayo ng party, magluluto kayo ng maraming kanin na ayaw nyong masira, nilalagyan ko yan ng konting suka. Hindi yan maglalasa kung konti lang. For every kilo of rice, you can put 1 tablespoon of vinegar. Hindi siya maglalasa dun sa tubig. Or yung iba naman, nilalagyan ng salt. That will at least keep your rice a little safe for the whole day. Soybeans. So yung soybeans natin dito, tokwa, taho, tofu, at saka yung mga soybeans natin. Okay? Lalo na kapag ito kasi naluto na to, yung hilaw pa. So yung mga tokwa nyo should always be in the refrigerator. This is a bean sprout. Itong nasa baba natin sa kaliwa. Pero hindi ito toge. Kamag-anak siya ng toge.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Now, kailan ka magpapalit ng gloves mo? Unang-una, meron tayong 4-hour rule. So, ibig sabihin, bacteria starts to grow on food on the 4th hour. Alam niyo yan. So, kapag 4 hours na, kahit na hindi ka pa tapos, let's say 8 hours ka maghihiwa ng manok, so magpapalit ka ng gloves on the 4th hour. Tapon mo na, wash your hands bago mo isuot ulit. Number 2, kahit wala pang 4 hours, kapag masyado na siyang madumi or may punit, papalitan mo. Number 3, wala pa siyang 4 hours, pero kanina, nasa chicken ka, ngayon nasa bread ka. You cannot use the same gloves. So, bago na namang work, you have to change gloves. Number 4, tinawag ka. O may telepono ka sa labas, you have to take the call. It's very urgent. So, huhubadin mo gloves mo, you take the call. Pagbalik mo, you cannot wear the same gloves. You have to get a new one. Okay? Tapos, importante, kanina ang hawak mo hilaw, ngayon ang hahawakan mo luto. Cross-contamination yon, you have to remove your gloves, wash your hands, dry them, and then put on a new set of gloves. Okay, ngayon. We do not allow bare hand contact, lalo na sa RTE natin, or ready to eat, like fruits and salads. May mga ibang state na nag-aalaw ng bare hand contact on ready to eat food. Basta may policies in place at saka yung hand washing and personal hygiene practices, nag-training to the fullest yung mga empleyado. Okay? Pero kapag ang papakainin mo ay senior citizen, children below 7, tsaka yung mga may sakit, definitely, kahit sa anong state, kahit sa anong bansa, bawal ang bare hand contact. Okay? So, a good food handler must wear clean clothing every day, must remove aprons when leaving the kitchen and then put it back when you return. No jewelry at work, kahit relo. Pwede ang hikaw pero stud, yung di dangling. Tapos dapat na sumusunod tayo sa personal hygiene, like nire-require natin ang araw-araw maligo, araw-araw mag-shampoo, araw-araw mag-deodorant, bawal ang pabango, tapos laging malinis ang uniforms every day. That's a personal hygiene program. Okay, ngayon kung may bigote, hindi naman pinagbabawal ang bigote sa workplace, pwede ka may bigote, pero yung bigote mo magkakaroon ng parang hairnet sa mukha. Or that's what we call a hair restraint, to prevent the hair from your mouth, to prevent it from getting into food. So, importante yan, okay? Tapos, mga hair accessories, bawal. Everyone must wear hairnet. Bawal ang false eyelashes. Bawal ang heavy makeup in the kitchen. Okay, ngayon, when you're leaving the kitchen, make sure that you hang your apron on specified areas in the kitchen. You do not go out with your apron. Protection mo din yan for your uniforms. That's also protection of the food in the kitchen from getting contaminated. And you never use the apron to wipe your hands. Okay, no jewelry. Pinagbabawal ko na rin ngayon kahit na wedding ring. Kasi bakit? Pag binasa mo ang kamay mo at may singsing ka, may tubig na naiiwan doon sa loob ng singsing mo. Tapos mamaya may amoy na yon. That's why kung pwede, kahit na wedding ring, inside the kitchen, we don't allow it. Okay. Saan ka pwedeng uminom? Paano ka pwede uminom? Saan ka pwede kumain? Paano ka kakain? Kapag ikaw ay nasa kusina. Generally, bawal kumain sa kusina. Bawal. Iba class ang kain, iba ang tikim. So, tikim is taste. Kain is talagang full kain. Bakit? Niiwasan natin yung saliva from spreading around. That's why you cannot eat inside the kitchen. There are areas outside the kitchen where you can have your meals. Hindi rin pwedeng manigarilyo sa kusina. Ngayon, yung uminom, hindi natin pwede pagbawal ang uminom sa kusina. Siguraduhin mo lang na yung tubig mo manggagaling sa isang covered container. Like, look at the picture here. Yung mama dun sa kanan, yung naka-X, is drinking his water from a big container. Tapos pwedeng may tumulo dyan after niya iangat yan. Ibaba yan. So ito namang mama sa kaliwa, may straw. So kasya lang yung straw sa bibig niya. So none of his saliva is expected to be flying around the kitchen. So yun yung proper way of drinking. Okay. Handling staff illnesses. Okay? Kapag ka meron kang empleyado na may sore throat at may fever, definitely may foodborne yan. Hindi siya pwedeng magluto. Hindi siya pwedeng mag-work around food. Pero kasi hindi naman yan conclusive of a foodborne illness. Kaya yung iba, pinapayagan nila mag-work pero not around food. Probably outside. Kung saan man pwede, but not around food. Kung meron siyang vomiting or diarrhea, the answer is simple. Restricted. I'm sorry. Bawal siya mag-work around food, so siya ay excluded. So pwede ka lang bumalik kung makakasik ka ng certification from your doctor that you are already fit to work. Kapag ka naninilaw, definitely, hepatitis yan, you are not allowed to work until you have the release document. Ito, definitely any of the big 6, exclusion. You can only come back if you present a medical certificate. Okay. Ito yung huling video na napanood nyo. Yung pangalawang video na napanood nyo is an introduction to the flow of food. Okay? Meron tayong may cycle na dinadaanan ng pagkain bago siya ma-serve sa kliyente o sa guest. Marami siyang dinadaanan. Okay? So sa bawat stage dun sa cycle na yon, we must make sure that no cross-contamination and no time temperature abuse has ever occurred. From 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, hanggang finally ma-serve mo ang food sa client. We make sure that every step along the way, food never entered the temperature danger zone and there was no cross-contamination that ever happened. Importante yan. That's something that you should observe. Okay, parati natin yung tatandaan. Okay, dito, hindi ko alam class kung nakuha nyo na yung knife bags nyo, pero kasi sa loob ng knife bag nyo, meron tayong tinatawag na food thermometer. Yun ang friend nyo sa kusina. Yun ang katulong nyo para masigurado na ang pagkain na niluluto nyo ay luto na. In the same manner, na ayaw din natin na overcook yung pagkain natin. So the use of the thermometer is important because if you are sure that the food is cooked in the same manner na hindi rin siya overcooked. Kasi pag overcooked dry, hindi na masarap. Okay, makikita nyo sa kanan ng screen, ito yung flow of food. From the time na binili mo hanggang sa iserve mo sa guest o sa customer. So from the first to the last, we make sure na walang cross-contamination at saka we make sure na walang time temperature abuse. As you go through each step, only then na masisigurado mo na kailanman walang tumubong microorganism and hindi tayo magkakaroon ng foodborne illness. Purchasing is bibili ka o mag-order ka, i-deliver. Pag dineliver na yan, ang tawag na doon receiving. Tatanggapin mo yung delivery, checkin mo, yung timbang, yung specs, at pag na-check mo na, itatago mo na, that's storing. After storing, kukuha ka para mag-prep. Pagka-prep mo, ibig sabihin ng prep, hinugasan, hiniwa, lulutuin mo na. Pagkatapos mong lutuin, it will stay for a while, i-hold mo, tapos palalamigin mo. Pag malamig na, itatago mo sa fridge o sa freezer. The following day, iinitin mo, tapos isi-serve mo. Kasi yung mga restaurant class, hindi naman nila niluluto per order yan eh. Pre-cook na yan. Ang gagawin lang nila class dyan, iinitin. Halimbawa, sa menu mo, meron kang kare-kare. Hindi ka naman magluluto ng kare-kare pagka may order. It will take you forever. Hindi pwede. So at least, ang nagawa mo na sa kare-kare mo, napalambutan mo na yung goto, o kung ano man yung lalagay mo sa kare-kare mo, napalambot mo na, tapos ilalagay mo sa fridge, tapos tuwing may order, kukuha ka, ilalabas mo, iinitin mo, hahaluan mo ng sauce, lagyan mong gulay. So definitely, meron kang pre-cooking, may cooling ka, tapos may reheating ka. So dito dapat mag-exercise ka ng precaution to make sure na walang cross-contamination at saka walang time temperature abuse. Okay. Now, as I said earlier in the previous chapter that we have studied, there are many ways on how you can prevent cross-contamination when you are preparing food. Okay? Unang-una, color-coded chopping boards. O review nga natin yung kulay ng mga chopping board natin para ma-check ko kung alam nyo. Okay. Ang chopping board na kulay green para saan?
Vegetable, chef.
Green. Class.
Vegetable. Vegetable, chef.
Ano to? Una, color-coded chopping.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh. Wait, Siri is answering me. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Nanakay ni Siri kasi ayaw niyo sumagot. Oh. Color-coded, green.
Vegetable.
Vegetable,
Vegetable,
chef.
Plus, pag green, hindi lang vegetables, pati fruits, ha? Kaya ang green, ang sagot sa green, produce. Sa green, gulay, at saka prutas. Produce. Okay. Red.
Meat, chef.
Okay, meat. Yellow.
Poultry, chef.
Okay,
Poultry.
blue.
Vegetable, chef.
Or
Fish and seafood.
Seafood.
Okay, white.
for dairy products or
Dairy products and ready to eat.
yes.
Okay, class, meron tayong brown. Bakit sa ng brown?
Para sa
Bread.
luto na, chef.
Okay, ready to eat, pwede, tsaka dairy, keso, yung mga dairy products natin, ginagamitan natin ng puti. Okay, so we use color-coded chopping boards. Meron din tayong tinatawag na color-coded knives na match dun sa kulay ng chopping board to make sure that yung pakwan mo hindi lasang sibuyas. Okay, to prevent cross-contamination. Okay, another way of preventing cross-contamination is either ako, ganito ginagawa ko para mabilis kasi ang residente ko sa isang araw na pinapakain, 140, 140 for lunch and 140 for dinner. Marami yon. Para pa breakfast. So, ang ginagawa ko para madali, it will cut down time on prep. Bumibili ako ng mga ingredients na cut na. Halimbawa, shredded cabbage, o kaya yung carrots na cube. Pagka ganon, it saves us time from doing the prep. Imbes na mag-hire ako ng additional kusinero, hindi naman ganong kalaki ang diferensya ng shredded carrots sa buong carrots, doon na lang ako sa cut up. Tapos pangalawa kasi, kapag putol na yung binili ko, shredded na, it prevents cross-contamination. Kasi kung di naman malaking kusina, hindi magsasalpukan yung manok tsaka yung isda working on the same area. Kasi cross-contamination yon. Okay? Or, kung wala ka namang way para maka-order ng mga cut na, pwede namang yung kapiranggot na kitchen na meron ka, yun ang gagamitin mo, pero ang gagawin mo na lang, mag-a-assign ka ng time for the prep. Halimbawa, ngayong umaga, sandwiches ang gagawin natin. Tapos mamayang konti naman, chicken. Hindi mo pinagsasabay-sabay. So, gagawin mo clean and sanitize after every food item that you're preparing. Okay? Ito importante sa lahat. Temperature control at ang pinakamahalaga mong instrumento dito ay ang thermometer. Gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, ang dangerous ay ang na magstay ang food beyond 4 hours ay ang temperature danger zone, which is between 41 degrees and 135. So, iwasan natin na magstay ang food sa temperature na yan lampas ng 4 na oras. Lampas ng 4 na oras. Okay? Pero, gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, sa loob ng 41 to 135, nandun yung 70 to 125, kung saan mas mabilis class, mas lalong mabilis kumalat ang microorganisms. Kasi yung, kumbaga, kainitan. Kumbaga, yun yung gustong-gustong temperature. So, yun yung mas delikadong temperature na tinatawag natin. Okay. So, to prevent time temperature abuse, kagaya ng nasa picture, maganda yung meron kayong ganyan sa buffet para malilista nyo anong oras nyo kinuha ang temperature at ano ang temperature na nakuha nyo. That's very important. Usually sa buffet may ganyan. Lalo na kung ang buffet mo ay beyond 4 hours, lalo na kung may buffet ka sa umaga, may buffet ka sa hapon, kagaya ng Vikings, na kung saan ang balak mo, kung ano yung matitira mo na pagkain sa buffet sa umaga, gusto mo pa rin iserve sa hapon, then you have to monitor the time and the temperature. Make sure that the thermometers that you're using are calibrated and you are using the correct one. And then this will minimize the length of time that your food stays at the temperature danger zone. Okay, class, ito yung thermometer na nandun sa knife bag nyo. The very common, the simplest of them all. This is what we call a bimetallic stem thermometer. Makikita nyo na may ulo. This is what we call the indicator head. Yan ang nagbabasa ng temperature. Nandyan yung mga numbers. Okay, yan ang gumagalaw kapag nilubog mo ang pagkain, ang thermometer sa pagkain. Gagalaw yan. Yung numero dyan gagalaw. Ngayon, sa ilalim ng indicator head o sa ilalim ng mismong meter temperature class, may makikita kayong parang tornilyo. Ang tawag natin dyan, calibration nut. Kasi class sa katagalan na ginagamit nyo ang thermometer, pwedeng mawala siya sa tamang temperature. Gumagalaw kasi ang calibration nut na yan eh. Kaya with the help of a long nose o yung liabe, gagalawin mo yung nut na yan para mapermanente mo yung Mamaya ituturo ko sa inyo sa calibration. Kung paano mo gagamitin yung, anong gagawin mo dyan sa tornilyo na yan, bakit mo siya gagalawin, paano mo siya gagalawin, para tama lagi ang reading ng iyong thermometer. Tapos yung mahabang stick, yan yung stem, yan yung nagbabasa ng temperature at ipinapadala niya sa indicator head. Tapos makikita nyo dun sa thermometer nyo, meron lubog, may kapiranggot na lubog, ang tawag natin dyan dimple. Kaya lang class dito sa drawing, masyadong mahaba yung dimple. Pero sa totoong buhay, kung titingnan nyo mga thermometers nyo, ang dimple nando sa dulo na ng thermometer nyo. Ito masyadong mataas eh. Masyadong mataas yung yung dimple. Yung dimple usually nasa baba yan. So mula dun sa dimple hanggang sa dulo ng thermometer mo, yun ang magbabasa. Babasahin niya yung temperature ng pagkain mo. So dapat tumatama ang pagkain hanggang sa dimple. Pero hindi ganyan kataas yung dimple. Mga 1/3 niyan. Okay, ang pangalawang thermometer ay mas mahal. Ito yung mas professional na ginagamit ng mga chefs na totoo sa malalaking hotel. Ang tawag dito, thermocouple. Thermocouple, yun yung hawak niya sa kanan na parang may siya, color yellow. Tapos sa dulo ng color yellow, may parang stick. Okay? Yung stick na yon ang tinatawag na probe. Nandyan yung tinatawag na dimple. Yan ang nagbabasa. Tapos yung thermocouple mo, nakadikit sa thermistor. Yung nasa kaliwa na parang cellphone. Diyan lumalabas yung temperature ng pagkain mo. Ang nagko-connect sa kanilang dalawa, wire. So ang maganda dito kasi class, may 4 siyang probe. Yung stick na gano'n, 4 yan. Merong immersion, merong surface, merong penetration, merong air. So, magagamit mo siya sa lahat. Yung thermometer ninyo, class, hindi siya pwedeng surface, hindi siya pwedeng air. Pwede lang siya immersion tsaka penetration. Yun lang ang pwede sa kanya. So, very limited yung nagagawa. Pero kasi ito, something like 5,000 pesos to eh. Nung unang panahon na, hindi ko alam ngayon kung magkano na siya ngayon. Okay, yung immersion, gagamitin mo siya kapag ang kinukuha mong temperature ay sabaw. May sabaw. So, ilulubog mo yung thermometer dun sa kaldero para makuha ang temperature ng sabaw. Yung surface class, patatamain mo lang sa labas ng kaldero. Surface lang, sa labas ng kaldero. Babasahin na niya ang temperature. Okay? Yung penetration, ilulubog mo siya sa gitna nung kinukuha mong makapal na karne. So, kukunin niya yung temperature ng steak, gagamitin mo siya doon. Okay? Yun namang air, para siyang infrared. So, sa malayo, makukuha mo ang temperature ng mga pagkain sa loob ng kahon. So, 4-in-1 ito. 4-in-1, kaya siya mahal. Okay, ayan class. Yung close-up ng probe niya, ito yung immersion sa kaliwa for liquids. Yung surface naman, para sa mga gilid ng kaldero. Penetration, ito yung nilulubog sa pagkain, sa mga karne. Okay, infrared class. Sana pagpunta niyo yung CIC, mapakita sa inyo yan. Infrared, gumagamit lang yan ng light para makuha ang temperature. Ginagamit dito class usually sa malalaking hotel sa receiving area nila. Para pag magre-receive sila ng food, hindi na nila kailangan kunan ng temperature isa-isa. Kundi padadaanin mo lang ang thermometer sa gilid ng kahon at makukuha na niya ang temperature. Habang umaakyat ka sa mga kahon, nakukuha niya na ang temperature. Hindi mo na kailangan isa-isa yan. This is for bulk deliveries. Kung yung marami, masyadong marami, na wala ka ng oras para gawin pa siya ng isa-isa. Okay? Ito class, hindi siya masyadong mahal. Pwede ito sa mga chef Ang maganda dito sa Thermapen, digital, tapos class, natutupi siya, pwede mo siyang itupi, pwede mo lagay sa bulsa mo. This cost around, noong unang panahon mga, meron din ng CIC niyan mga 3,000 isa niyan. Pero it works on the same principle na pareho ng thermometer nyo, yung nilulubog. Maganda lang dito, class, digital. Pero hindi rin siya, wala rin siyang pareho nung thermocouple na palit-palit ang kanyang probe. Hindi siya ganon. Cute lang siya tingnan. Okay. Ito, class, may mga ibang mga pagkain na may mga tape. Okay, nakalagay sa labas nung supot o yung container ng pagkain, may nakalagay na parang tape. Anytime na bumaba ang temperature ng pagkain o tumaas, nakalagay lahat dun sa tape yun. Hindi mo pwede dayain. So, malalaman mo pag nabilasan na yon o kung frozen na natunaw, malalaman mo. It's attached to the package that's being delivered by the supplier. Tapos, class, one-time use lang to, disposable. It's disposable. Ayan, class, yung tinatawag na time and temperature indicators. Okay? So, irreversible yan. Hindi mo yan pwedeng tanggalin, hindi mo pwedeng palitan. May guide ito, no? Kapag ang temperature ng pagkain ay umabot sa 5, then it has thawed already. So, dapat ang temperature ng pagkain mo na maintain sa 1. Ibig sabihin ng 2, umiinit na at tutunaw na. Usually, kinakabit lang to, class, sa mga pagkain na supposedly frozen. For frozen items only. Okay, ngayon, paano ba gumamit ng thermometer? Class, ang thermometer, number 1, ginagamit yan, kinukuha natin ang temperature ng pagkain 2 beses. Okay. Gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, kailangan lumubog ang thermometer sa dimple. Kailangan yung dimple nando sa loob ng pagkain. Kaya, malalaman niyo yan, pag ginawakan niyo yung thermometer niya, makikita kayong parang lubog dun sa malapit sa dulo. Dapat maabot ng pagkain yung dimple na yon. Kasi yon ang magpapadala ng reading papunta sa calibration head. Doon sa ulo. Nandun yung mga numbers. Okay, 2 beses mo kukunin ang temperature. Number 1, sa gitna. Bakit sa gitna? Pinakamatagal maluto ang gitna. Kasi ang init nang gagaling sa gilid papunta sa gitna. So ito yung pinakamatagal maluto. Kaya yun ang unang-una mong kukunan ng temperature. Number 2, ang pinakamatagal maluto bukod sa gitna, yung pinakamakapal. So, 2 yan. Pinakagitna at saka pinakamakapal. Kung nagkataon na yung gitna mo ang pinakamakapal, uulitin mo lang siya on the same spot. Okay? Tapos, hintayin mo, meron timetable na susundan, class. You wait for the time. May nakalagay tayo sa table natin. Hanggang gaano katagal dapat steady ang temperature na yon para mo masabi na yung niluluto mo ay luto na. So, meron tayong tinatawag na minimum time at saka minimum internal cooking temperature. Okay. Ngayon, ang thermometers, class, kapag matagal mo nang ginagamit, gumagalaw ang numero niya. Ibig sabihin, nawawala siya sa tamang numero. Kaya dapat mo siya i-calibrate. Yung thermometers nyo, class, pwede nyong i-calibrate. Pwedeng ice, pwedeng boiling. Okay, so sa ice, simple lang. Kumuha ka ng isang container, punuin mo ng yelo, lagyan mo ng water. Tapos ilagay mo yung thermometer mo doon. Kailangan mag-touch yung dimple kasi yun na magbabasa. Tapos tingnan nyo, class. Okay, tingnan nyo tong thermometer na to. Dapat, class, dahil ito ay freezing, dapat marating nung kamay yung 0. 0 degrees. Pero hindi niya narating. Ibig sabihin yung tornilyo niya gumalaw. So, kukuha ka ng pliers o ng kung ano man yung pang-ikot dyan, screwdriver or what. Tapos, ang gagawin mo, class, gagalawin mo yung calibration nut sa ilalim ng bilog na yan. May tornilyo. Gagalawin mo yan hanggang marating natin ang 0 degrees. Pag nakating na ang 0 degrees, calibrated na yan. Okay na. Or kung ayaw mo ng yelo, pwedeng kumukulong tubig. So, kapag kumukulo na yung tubig, ilulubog mo na yung thermometer, tapos kailangan maabot niya yung kabila namang dulo. 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Dapat marating niya. Pag hindi niya narating yung dulo na yon, kukuha ka uli ng pliers o ng pang-ikot para maikot mo yung calibration hanggang marating niya ang 100 or 212 degrees. Calibrated na yan. So you repeat that every time. Normally yan, food service would be required to do that at least every week. Para masigurado natin na efficient ang thermometers natin. Class, pwede nyo yung gawin sa thermometers nyo. Pwede. Pero yung infrared, yung thermocouple, merong nagkakalibrate. Hindi kasi pwede, wala naman yung tornilyo na pwede mong galawin. It's only for the bimetallic stem. Pwede ka mag-calibrate on your own. Okay, let's have one more film. Number 3 ba tayo? Ilan na yung napanood nyo kanina? How many did you watch? 2? Class?
Yes, chef.
That's it.
Dalawa, chef.
Okay, ito na yung last nyo for today, okay? Iba bukas.
There isn't much that we don't serve here. Hot and cold buffets with everything from entrees to desserts. Fresh carved turkey, ham, and rib roast. On top of that, you can order steaks, chops, chicken, and salmon hot off the grill. And that doesn't even count breakfast. We've got a big kitchen. Everything we got going on keeps it going full tilt all the time. They really have to stay on their toes in there. And so do I. I've been with Charlie's for as long as I can remember. I started on the floor and worked my way up. And along the way, I must have taken every food safety course that corporate had to offer. And that's on top of all the training courses I've taken. I wanted to cover as much as I could because there's a lot to know, a lot to watch out for, and a lot of knowledge to pass on to my staff. I learned 2 basic lessons early on way back when. The first was to develop 20/20 vision with the eyes in the back of my head. And the other was to train my staff right so I can rely on their skills and their eyes to keep our food safe and the operation running smoothly. After we've safely received and stored all our food, it has to be prepared, cooked, cooled, reheated, and served with just as much care and attention to detail. We have to do that because the risk of cross-contamination and time temperature abuse are the greatest at those particular points in the flow of food. To prevent these risks, you're going to need to know how to thaw food, how to prepare specific food, how to cook food, and about the cooking requirements for specific types of food. You'll also need to know the proper way to cool food, reheat food, hold food, and serve food. Let's start with food that you've just taken out of the freezer. When you thaw frozen food, it's exposed to the temperature danger zone. And just like that, any foodborne microorganism present will begin to grow. To prevent this growth, you need to make sure that food is never thawed at room temperature. There's only 4 acceptable methods for thawing potentially hazardous food, which is also known as food that needs time and temperature control for safety, or TCS food for short. You can thaw food in a refrigerator at 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius, or lower. You can submerge it under running potable water at a temperature of 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 Celsius, or lower. You can do it in a microwave oven, but only if the food will be cooked immediately after thawing. And you can do it as part of the cooking process. Just remember that the product has to meet the required minimum internal cooking temperature. Preparation is the next step in the flow of food in your operation, and you have to take precautions here too. Let's start with salads containing food that need time and temperature control for safety, such as salads with chicken, tuna, egg, pasta, and potato in them. These have all been involved in foodborne illness outbreaks. Since these salads are not typically cooked after they've been prepared, you don't have the chance to eliminate microorganisms that may have been introduced during preparation. But if you follow these preparation guidelines, you'll minimize the risk associated with them. First, if you're using leftovers to make salads like pasta, chicken, or potatoes, make sure you've eliminated any potential hazards. That means that these ingredients should only be used if they've been cooked, held, cooled, and stored properly. And you should also make sure that they haven't been kept past the use-by date. Food that needs time and temperature control for safety also includes eggs and egg mixtures, since they're able to support the rapid growth of microorganisms. If you're preparing egg dishes requiring little or no cooking, you should consider using pasteurized shell eggs or egg products. You can do dishes such as mayonnaise, eggnog, Caesar salad dressing, and hollandaise sauce. If you mainly serve high-risk populations, use pasteurized eggs or egg products when serving dishes that are raw or undercooked. Shell eggs that are pulled must also be pasteurized. You may use unpasteurized shell eggs if the dish will be cooked all the way through, such as an omelet or a cake. When you're preparing produce, you need to closely follow these guidelines. You have to make sure your fruit and vegetables do not come in contact with surfaces exposed to raw meat and poultry. So you need to prepare produce away from raw meat, poultry, eggs, and cooked and ready-to-eat food. And you should clean and sanitize the workspace and all utensils you're going to use during preparation. After that, you have to wash fruit and vegetables thoroughly under running water so you can remove dirt and other contaminants. Only after you've done that can you start cutting, cooking, or combining them with any other ingredients. And you have to pay particular attention to leafy greens, such as lettuce and spinach. Dirt and other contaminants can hide between the leaves, so you should always remove the outer leaves and pull the items completely apart, then rinse them thoroughly. Now, let's move on to cooking. The only way to reduce microorganisms in food to safe levels is to cook it to the required minimum internal temperature. Now, this temperature must be reached and held for a specific amount of time. This temperature will vary from product to product. Use a thermometer with a suitable sized probe to make sure that the product has reached its required minimum internal temperature for a specific amount of time. And remember, I'm talking about the internal temperature of the food, not the temperature setting for an oven. When checking temperatures, always check in the thickest part of the food, taking at least 2 readings in different locations. Remember, while cooking can reduce the number of microorganisms on food to safe levels, it will not destroy spores or toxins they may have produced. That's why it's really critical to handle food safely before it's cooked. That way, spores and toxins don't have time to form. Now, there's different cooking requirements for specific types of food. For all poultry, that includes whole or ground chicken, turkey, and duck, Cook to a minimum internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 Celsius for 15 seconds. If you're making stuffed meat, fish, poultry, and pasta, you need to cook it until the food reaches a minimum internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 Celsius for 15 seconds. And when you're cooking ground meat, such as hamburgers or sausage, you should cook it until it reaches the minimum internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit, 68 Celsius for 15 seconds. If you're cooking injected meat like brine ham and flavor injected roast, you have to cook it until it reaches the minimum internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit, 68 Celsius for 15 seconds. For pork, beef, veal, and lamb, make sure you cook steaks and chops to a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit, 63 Celsius for 15 seconds. For roasts, you need to cook them until they reach a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit, 63 Celsius, and hold at that temperature for 4 minutes. Fish should be cooked until it reaches a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit, 63 Celsius for 15 seconds. There's different guidelines for eggs, and they can be divided into 2 different categories: immediate service and hot held. If you're preparing them to serve right away, they should be cooked to a minimum internal cooking temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit, 63 Celsius for 15 seconds. But if they're going to be hot held for service, they should be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit, 68 Celsius for 15 seconds. When you're cooking food that needs time and temperature control for safety, like eggs, poultry, fish, and meat in the microwave, its minimum internal temperature should be 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 Celsius. Be sure to cover the food and rotate or stir it halfway through cooking. And after cooking, let it stand at least 2 minutes to let the temperature even out. But there's more than cooking temps to watch out for. Cooling is just as important. Food that needs time and temperature control for safety must be cooled from 135 degrees to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 57 to 21 Celsius within 2 hours. And then from 70 degrees to 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 to 5 Celsius, or lower in the next 4 hours. Remember, this is a 2-stage process, 2 hours plus 4 hours. Both stages are very important, and it's critical that you keep your eye on the clock, especially during the first stage. That's because while microorganisms grow well in the temperature danger zone, they grow much faster at temperatures between 125 degrees and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 52 and 21 Celsius. So food must pass through this temperature range quickly to minimize this growth. Cooling the food to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 Celsius within 2 hours allows it to pass quickly and safely through the most dangerous part of the temperature danger zone. But if food hasn't reached 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 Celsius within 2 hours, you have to either throw it out or reheat it and cool it again. Keep in mind that if you can cool the food from 135 degrees to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 57 to 21 Celsius in less than 2 hours, you can use the remaining time to cool it to 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 Celsius or lower. However, the total cooling time cannot be longer than 6 hours. For example, if you cool food from 135 degrees to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 57 to 21 Celsius in 1 hour, you have the remaining 5 hours to get the food to 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 Celsius or lower. As always, check your local regulatory requirements. These are reliable times and temperatures, but make sure you check them against your local requirements. Now, when you're talking about cooling food, let's start with the big don't. You should never place large quantities of hot food in a refrigerator to cool. That's because refrigerators are designed to keep cold food cold. Most are not designed to cool hot food quickly. Besides that, placing hot food in a refrigerator may raise the internal temperature of the cooler. You can be warming up the interior and putting all the food stored there at risk. Before you start cooling food, you should begin by reducing its size to more workable portions. This allows it to cool faster. So cut large food items into smaller pieces or divide large containers of food into smaller containers or shallow pans. Once you've done that, there's a number of ways to cool food quickly and safely. Now, here's the 3 most common methods. 1, you can put the food in an ice water bath. You divide the food into smaller containers, then place them into a sink or large pot filled with ice water. Then stir the food frequently to cool it faster and more evenly. 2, food will cool even faster if you stir it with an ice paddle. An ice paddle is hollow, so it can be filled with ice or with water and then frozen. 3, you can place food in a blast chiller or tumble chiller. Now, blast chillers move cold air across food at high speeds to remove heat. They're especially useful in chilling large quantities of food, like several pans of chili. Whenever you can, use a combination of these methods to cool food quicker. That's enough on cooling. Proper reheating of food has to be done just as carefully. Food that needs time and temperature control for safety that has been previously cooked, then reheated for hot holding, must be moved through the temperature danger zone as quickly as possible. You'll need to reheat it to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 Celsius, for 15 seconds within 2 hours. If the food hasn't reached this temperature within 2 hours, throw it out. With all the buffet service we have here, proper food holding is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. So let me go over the general rules with you that you've got to follow to keep your food safe. Regularly check the internal temperature of both your hot and cold food using a calibrated thermometer fitted with the appropriate type of probe. Cold food that needs time and temperature control for safety must be held at an internal temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 Celsius or lower. And hot food that needs time and temperature control for safety must be held at an internal temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit, 57 Celsius or higher. But remember, never reheat food in equipment that isn't designed to do it. For example, you shouldn't use the steam table to reheat any food products. You've also got to check the temperature of food at least every 4 hours. If the food is not at the proper temperature, you have to throw it out. If you want to avoid wasting food, you should do what I do and check the temperature every 2 hours to leave time for corrective action. This might sound basic or obvious, but always cover the food to protect food from contaminants. The covers also help maintain the internal temperature of food. After handling food safely and cooking it properly, you don't want to risk contamination when serving it. That means training your kitchen and service staff properly and setting standards and procedures for any self-service areas. You need to train your staff to follow these procedures for serving food safely. Your staff should only use clean and sanitized utensils for serving, and they should use separate utensils for each food item, then clean and sanitize them properly after changing serving tasks. On top of that, the utensils should be cleaned and sanitized at least once every 4 hours during continuous use. You need to take every measure to minimize bare hand contact with food that's cooked or ready to eat. Your staff should handle food with tongs, deli sheets, or gloves. Some regulatory authorities allow bare hand contact in an operation if they've received prior approval. To do this, they must first outline policies for employee health and training in hand washing and personal hygiene. Check your local regulatory requirements to see if this applies to your operation. You also have to establish and enforce safe food handling practices with everybody on your staff. Everyone should take care to handle glassware and dishes properly. They shouldn't touch the food contact areas of plates, bowls, glasses, or cups. When a server holds a dish, they should do it holding the bottom or the edge. Cups should be held by their handles, and glassware should be held by the middle, bottom, or stem. They should also be careful to hold flatware and utensils at the handle. And make sure your flatware storage area is set up so servers grasp handles, not food contact surfaces. When your servers are getting ice, they should use ice scoops or tongs to do it. And they should never scoop ice with their bare hands or use a glass or cup because it might chip or break. It's also important to remember to store ice scoops in a sanitary location and not in the ice. The last area I want to talk about is self-service. Now, I know from experience that buffets and food bars can be a real challenge. That's because so many people have no idea how easy it is for food to be contaminated. A lot of our work here is protecting the customers from themselves. The best way to prevent contamination in the buffet area is to have it monitored closely by employees trained in food safety. You should follow these guidelines to prevent contamination and time temperature abuse. Remember to use sneeze guards or food shields to protect the food on display. The sneeze guards should be located 14 inches, 36 centimeters above the food counter, and shields should extend 7 inches, 18 centimeters beyond the food. You also need to identify all food items on the buffet. That means labeling all the items on your food bar. Lastly, customers can't be allowed to refill soiled plates or use soiled flatware at the food bar. Like I said before, there's a lot to know and a lot to watch out for. The busier it gets, the more closely you have to pay attention to the details. And I mean all the details. Sometimes it seems like you have to keep one eye on the time and the other eye on the temperature and the eyes in the back of your head watching everything else. So train your people right. They can be a lot of help to you. Every one of them is like an extra pair of trained eyes.
So hanggang chapter 5 tayo ngayon, okay? So that tomorrow we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Class, kanina, nakaabang ako ng alas 7, kaso hindi sa akin nabigay yung code. Doon ako naka-open na ako, pero doon sa isang, ewan ko, nakapasok ako pero hindi dito sa site natin. So, okay ba tayo bukas, 7 o'clock, class?
Okay, Chef.
Sige,
Yes,
so
sir.
7,
Yes, Chef.
okay, 7 o'clock tayo bukas, ha? I will
Yes, sir.
ask for hingin ko na sa kanila yung password, tsaka yung code. Para 7 tayo bukas, kasi bukas, we have chapter 6 up to chapter 10. Tomorrow is Friday dyan, di ba?
Yes, chef.
So, para fresh na fresh sa mind nyo, yung lesson pag nag-exam kayo ng Saturday. Okay? So, the last chapter that we're having for today, is chapter 5. Chapter 5 na ako, alam ko yun. Receiving. Okay, receiving tayo, eh? Chapter 5, okay? So, purchasing, receiving, and storage. So, what are the objectives of this chapter? The objectives is to know how to choose an approved and reputable supplier, the criteria when you should accept or reject food, labeling and dating food, and storing. Yan lang yan, wala pa tayo sa cooking. Okay. Unang-una, class, kapag ikaw ay magtatrabaho sa hotel and you will be taken in as a cook or as a chef, kuminsan hihingin ang suggestion nyo sa choice ng mga suppliers. Okay. Ganito ang technique ko. Pag pumipili ako ng supplier for any food establishment that I am working for, ang una kong hinihingi, yung mga documents. So, kailangan ko ng mayor's permit. Una muna DTI, tapos yung, ibig sabihin yung name registration niya, tapos permit sa mayor, kailangan ko rin ng sanitary permit, tapos yung mga BIR, kailangan ko yun. So, kailangan malinis lahat ng papeles niya. Number 2 na tinitingnan ko, yung warehouse. Kasi doon manggagaling yung mga produkto na dadaling nila sa akin. Kung siya ay supplier ng karne, titingnan ko yung kung saan nakatago yung mga karne niya. Kung siya ang kumakatay ng karne niya, titingnan ko yung slaughterhouse niya. Tapos titingnan ko yung mga papeles na nagpapatunay na lahat ng karne niya ay dumaan, no, sa tamang proseso. Sila ay hindi double dead. Yung mga karne niya malinis, malusog. Okay? Tapos pag na-check ko na yung warehouse niya, ang susunod na check-in ko, mga health permit, mga delivery boy niya, at saka yung mga nagtatrabaho sa warehouse. So, para masigurado kung walang magiging cause ng foodborne illness. Tapos, tinitingnan ko pati itsura ng driver, tsaka yung mga delivery boy, tinitingnan ko kung wala siya mga sugat-sugat. Tapos, ang huli kong checkan yung kanyang delivery truck. Sisiguraduhin ko na yung truck niya maayos, kung ang dinideliver niya sa aking karne, either yung truck niya ay may freezer o kaya meron siyang mga ice chest sa loob ng truck kung saan nakalagay yung karne para during delivery hindi siya papasok sa temperature danger zone. Okay. Yun sa supplier ko yun, ha. Doon naman sa receiving area ko, sisiguraduhin mo na yung lugar na pagre-receivean mo ng deliveries may relo, may timbangan, at saka may thermometer. So, sa mga pinagtrabahuan ko dyan sa Pilipinas class, hindi naman kasi everyday in delivery. Usually, pinakamadalas yan 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week. Ang dumadating sa umaga ay mga karne, manok, isda. Pinakatanghali kong tinatanggap yan 8 o'clock in the morning. Kasi ang mga baboy baka sa madaling araw kinakatay. Tapos yung manok, ganun din. So gusto ko pagdating sa akin, kung pwede pa, yung kasabihan na mainit-init pa, pupunta na sa akin. Pwede lang kung ang in-order ko, frozen. So usually, yung gulay, yung prutas, yung mga karne, manok, isda, sa umaga yan. Twice or thrice a week. Tapos yung mga grocery, yung mga bigas, yung mga harina, asukal, madalas yan once a week sa hapon. Kasi hindi naman sila kailangang ilagay sa fridge. Kasi sila ay mga delata at mga bigas. So ang una mong gagawin, pagdating ng delivery mo, titingnan mo kung ito ba yung in-order ko, kung ito ba yung liempo, ito ba yung pata. Tapos titimbangin. I-inspectin mo kung sariwa siya, hinahawakan mo, titimbangin mo. Pag na-clear na, pipirmahan mo yung acknowledgement. Wala ka isosoli, tatanggapin mo. Kung may isosoli ka, meron ka tinatawag na recall form. Isosoli, tapos tatanggalin doon sa pinaka-total receipt. Gagawin ka ng panibago. Tapos pag natimbang mo na, ilalagay mo na siya sa trolley mo at diretso na sa freezer. Una mong tinatago yung mga freezer, pangalawa mo itatago yung mga fridge o refrigerator. At hindi mo siya isasabay sa dry storage. Para kasi class may mga establishment, sabay-sabay yung delivery ng karne, manok, isda, gulay, prutas, at saka yung grocery. Hindi pwedeng sabay-sabay kasi tatagal yung oras mo, tapos yung karne mo, hindi mo matatago agad. So immediately after na matimbang mo, ma-check mo kung sariwa, okay ang specs, tatago mo na yan sa freezer. Diretso, to prevent your delivery from getting into the temperature danger zone. Okay, so I have here certain criteria na ginagamit natin para malaman natin kung pwede nating i-reject, kung dapat i-reject o pwedeng i-accept. Pag karne, ang kulay niyan dapat, pag baka, mapula-pula, pag baboy, pink. Pag lamb, mapula. Hindi brown, hindi green, at hindi siya malambot. Okay, dapat pag hinawakan mo, bumabalik siya. Okay, pero kung madulas, dry o sticky, o maasim yung amoy, okay, hindi siya pwedeng tanggapin. Ibig sabihin, bilasana yung dinadala sa'yo. Okay, so kung makikita nyo dito sa picture ko, yung karne na sariwa ay lighter ang color, darker ang color nung karne medyo bilasana. Okay. Pag manok, pwede mong kunin ng temperature, pero kung yan ay bagong katay, dapat firm ang kanyang karne. Pagka nilubog mo pag ginawakan mo, dapat bumabalik agad. Walang amoy, tapos wala kang makikita na color purple o color green sa manok mo. Kasi a purple or a green color indicates na yan ay hindi na fresh. Okay? Kita mo tong reject, medyo nakabukaka na yung manok. Hindi kagaya ng accept. Intact yung manok. Ibig sabihin nun, maluwag na yung meat niya. Soft na yung meat niya. Okay, pag isda naman, dapat mapula yung bright red yung kanyang hasang, pero hindi mapula yung mata. Kasi ganun din, pag ginawakan mo, bumabalik. Tapos ang amoy niya, amoy dagat. Hindi amoy ammonia. Okay? So kung makikita mo, class, yung isdang reject, natatanggal na yung kanyang scales. Tapos yung mata niya, hindi na bright. Tapos yung buntot niya, kita mo yung fresh, nakatayo yung buntot. Ito parang nakagano na. Tapos pag ginawakan mo yan, lumulubog yung daliri mo. Pagka bilasana. Okay, pagka naman mga shellfish, make sure na nakasara pa siya, tapos hindi basag-basag, tapos amoy dagat. So kung makikita niyo yung tahong, ito sa reject, nakabuka na. Kasi ang shellfish na buhay, nakasara. Pag niluto mo, tsaka pa lang siya bubuka. Okay, yung mga crustacean, gaya ng hipon, at saka crabs, at saka lobster, dapat amoy dagat. Tapos dapat yung hipon class, L-shape, hindi C, L-shape. Okay, ang itlog naman, mas gusto ko yung itlog na rough, tapos mabigat. Dapat mabigat siya, tapos hindi crack ang shells niya. Tapos pwede mo siya itapat sa light. Pag tinapat mo siya sa light, dapat yung airspace niya sa loob, maliit lang. Kasi the bigger the airspace inside the egg, the more luma yung itlog, the more stale the egg is. Tapos pag binuksan mo yung itlog na medyo luma na, kumakalat na yung pula niya tsaka yung puti. Pero kung sariwa yan, buong-buo yung pula tsaka yung puti ng itlog. Okay, pag gatas naman, normally we don't open this. Pero kasi, ang tinitingnan lang natin sa gatas, best before. Hindi mo yan pwede buksan. Kasi pag binuksan mo, hindi mo na masasoli. Pero dapat hindi siya maasim pag binuksan mo na. Okay, ang mga delata class, kailangan buo yung karatulan niya, yung papel niya, tapos walang namamaga, o kaya walang kupi-kupi, o walang parang kinagatan ng ipis o ng daga. Okay, yun namang mga naka-vacuum pack. Kung frozen yan, item, you should receive it frozen. Dapat wala siyang tubig sa laba. Wala siyang yelo sa loob. Kasi pag may yelo sa loob yan, ibig sabihin natunaw, tapos finreeze uli. Kaya yung natunaw na tubig, nag-freeze uli, naging yelo. Dapat ang yelo niya nasa labas, wala sa loob. Okay? Mga delata natin, gaya na sinabi ko kanina, hindi namamaga, walang butas, may best before, walang kagatang labels. Okay, so dapat nagte-train tayo, gaya na sinabi ko kanina, kung sino yung ilalagay mong tao to receive, make sure they have the correct tools. These are the weighing scales, the trolley, and the thermometer. And you have to check everything and store it immediately, lalo na in freezer. Okay, itong key drop class, ginagawa dito sa amin, sa Amerika. Pero hindi yata uubra sa Pilipinas yan. Okay, how does key drop work? Okay, yung kasing namin, walk-in freezer at saka walk-in fridge. Nasa kusina yon, pero wala naman susi yon. Pwede lang silang pumasok. Halimbawa, no one is there to accept the delivery. yung delivery, usually kung sino yung driver, yun ang delivery boy. So ito trolley lang niya yung for example, yung mga karne, tapos ipapasok niya sa freezer. Tapos yung mga gulay, tsaka mga fruits, itutulak lang niya, papasok niya sa fridge. Tapos yung dry storage, ipapasok lang niya sa pantry, doon sa kwarto namin for dry storage. Tapos meron ako dong parang mailbox, doon niya iiwan yung invoice, yung delivery receipt niya. Okay, tapos kung walang nag-receive, okay lang. Ngayon, kapag tapos na yung mga kusinero sa kanilang ginagawa, papasok sila sa freezer, kukunin muna nila yung invoice. O kaya, like in my case, meron akong assistant ko, kitchen manager, chine-check niya yung delivery versus the invoice. Checkin niya, hindi ka matatakot na mananakawan. Sa Pilipinas kasi, pag iniwan mo yung ganyan, pag nag-deliver yan, pati yung laman ng warehouse mo, makukuha yan. Ito, checkin namin kung tama. Hindi na namin tinitimbang eh. Tapos, halimbawa, nagdala siya na, ang in-order ko, buong tenderloin. Ang dinala niya sa akin, hiwa-hiwa. Pwede ko isoli. Okay? Pwede ko i-return, tatanggalin ko dun sa invoice, tapos tatawagan ko siya, i-return ko, papalitan niya. Okay? Isosoli ko. Pero dahil mali lang yung cut na binigay niya. Pero kung may nakita akong pandaraya, halimbawa, order kong baboy, liempo. Tama naman, liempo dinala niya. Pero hindi na fresh. So, nakakaramdam ako doon ng parang may pandaraya. Hindi ko isosoli. Recall ang tawag doon. Pipick upin niya, pero hindi ko na i-request ang replacement. Tapos, if worst comes to worst, pwede ko pa siyang tanggalin sa list of supplier. Kasi parang may deceit, may pandaraya. So, iba yung recall. Recall, isosoli mo, walang kapalit. Reject yun, i-reject mo. Pero pag return, nagkamali lang, papalitan nila, tapos okay ka. Okay. So, when you reject, ihiwalay mo yung items na ni-reject mo sa accepted, pwede mo sulatan ng papel, pwede niyang i-pick up yon anytime kahit walang tao. Tapos you have to log in. Okay, recall, tatanggalin mo sa inventory, ihiwalay mo, tapos inform mo yung staff na huwag gagamitin, ibabalik mo, sasabihin mo, hindi ito fresh. You gave me stale meat, hindi ito fresh, huwag mo na palitan. Then you can change your supplier. Okay. Now, gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, para ma-check ang temperature, ilulubog mo ang thermometer sa, this is for receiving. Ilulubog mo yung thermometer sa gitna at pinakamakapal. Pero klasyong ganito, kung mag-order ka ng 80 pounds na manok, hindi mo na to kaya gawin. Okay, pagka ganyan ang ginagamit namin, infrared. Dadaanan mo lang ng thermometer. Kasi mantakin mo kung iisa-isay mo yung manok na yan. It will take you forever. Okay? Para naman ma-check mo ang temperature ng mga vacuum pack, hindi mo kailangan butasan yung supot. Pagdidikitin mo lang ang dalawang vacuum pack na, for example, bacon, pagdidikitin mo, tapos ilulubog mo yung thermometer sa gitna to get the temperature. Okay, we don't do this again. Yung ilulubog mo ang thermometer sa loob ng gatas. We don't do this. Yung iba ginagawa, ako, I never do this, even here, we don't do this. Yung iba, halimbawa, meron kang isang kahon na ang laman 12, gagawin nila yan sa unang gatas. But again, we don't do that. We don't do that. Kasi hindi nakukunin ng supplier pag binuksan mo na. So, pwede ka mag-infrared sa labas. Okay? Pagka cold ang TCS food mo, it should be 41 degrees. Pag buhay ang shellfish mo, pwedeng 45 to 50. Pag shellfish na shocked, ibig sabihin hindi na siya buhay. For example, hipon o crabs, it should be 41. Shell eggs again, pwede mo infrared na lang yan, 45. Pag gatas, 45. Pag nag-order ka ng hot food, dapat 135. Pag nag-order ka ng frozen, dapat frozen siya dadating sa'yo. Okay. Ito yung picture na makikita nyo, hipon to, pero may yelo sa loob. You don't accept this kasi it proves na yung hipon mo natunaw, finreeze uli, kaya nagkaroon ng yelo sa loob. Ang yelo dapat nasa labas, wala sa loob. So this should be rejected. Okay, i-reject din natin, kagaya nito, this is flour. Apparently mukhang nabasa yung supot ng arena, tas natuyo, kaya may mancha. Pag ganito, may kagat, may butas, namamaga, o kaya sira ang kahon, expired, o kaya may kagat ng ipis o daga, tapos water stain, tapos evidence na binago yung best before, then you reject it. Okay. Kapag naman shellfish dito sa Amerika, humihingi kami ng shell stock identification tags. Parang index card lang yan. Nakalagay doon yung ano in order mo, mga hipon, tapos farm ratio. Nakalagay dyan saang tubig kinuha, saang town, anong tubig pinagkuhanan. Para kung may magreklamo sa mga customer mo, alam mo kung sino yung where you should pinpoint, where you should point your finger to. You keep it on file for 90 days. Tapos pag walang nangyari within 90 days, pwede mo na itapon. Ganon din ang isda na hindi mo lulutuin ng todo. Diba? Gagawin mo siyang kinilaw. Meron ka ring tag para alam mo kung saan hinuli yung isda. Wala siyang anong tawag dito? Red tide. Tapos you keep it on file for 90 days. Okay. So ito nabanggit ko na to kanina, yung karne na slimy or dry o pag nilubog mo yung daliri mo, hindi siya bumabalik at saka ang amoy niya, iba pang amoy niya, reject it. Okay, ngayon, ito class, kapag liwa, this is mashed potato. Kumuha ka ng mashed potato, kailangan tatakpan mo siya ng film, tapos ilalagay mo yung pangalan ng produkto, kailan mo siya ginawa, ingredients niya, tapos hanggang kailan siya pwede. It has to be labeled properly. Everything that you keep in your fridge has to be labeled. So yung common name ng food, gaano siya karami, ingredients niya, kung nilagyan mo siya ng artificial flavor, sino ang gumawa, at saka kung may allergen, ilalagay mo. Everything, it must be complete. Okay, date marking, ito, ilalagay mo, like for example, this is potato salad, kailan mo siya ginawa, anong oras mo siya ginawa, at kailan siya itatapon. Dapat nakalagay. Diba, potato salad, pwede lang siya ng 4 days, ilalagay mo kailan mo siya ginawa, at kailan siya itatapon. Okay, yan na tayo na date marking. Date when you made it, and date when it should be thrown away. Okay? Ang bilang natin class, usually, kung 7 days siya pwede, kung ginawa mo siya ng October 1, you don't start counting October 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No. Pag magde-date marking ka, kung October 1 mo siya ginawa, ang start ng bilang mo October 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Tatapon na siya. If it's good for 7 days. Okay? Now, if you have 2 or more ingredients in your food and they have different expiration dates, ang date ng food mo will be the first expiration. Halimbawa, ito is shrimp jambalaya. Ang ingredients niya, sausage at shrimp. Ang expiration ng sausage ay December 10. Ang expiration ng shrimp ay December 8. So, ang expiration ng jambalaya mo, December 8. Hindi 10. Kasi the shrimp will go, the expiration of the shrimp, it's December 8. Susundin mo yung unang-una na mag-expire. Okay? Now, temperature, tatandaan nyo, huwag nyo kakalimutan ha. Ang temperature ng fridge, 41. Ang temperature ng 41 and below, or 5 degrees Celsius. Ang temperature ng freezer ay 0 degrees dapat or below. Ang temperature ng dry storage, 50 to 70. So madali lang yan ha. Dry storage 50 to 70, fridge 41 and below, freezer 0 and below. Fahrenheit lahat. Puro Fahrenheit. Ulitin ko ha. Dry storage 50 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, fridge 41 degrees Fahrenheit and below, freezer 0 degrees Fahrenheit and below. Okay, pag nagtago tayo ng pagkain sa freezer at saka sa fridge, kailangan hindi punong-puno, kailangan nakakaikot ang hangin, kailangan hindi laging binubuksan ng sinasara, huwag lalagyan ng papel yung shelves para nakakaikot ang hangin, tapos dapat may thermometer sa loob ng malalaking freezer at saka cooler o fridge. Okay? FIFO is first in, first out. This applies to everything, kahit gulay, kahit karne, yung luma nilalagay sa harap, yung bagong delivery nilalagay sa likod. Unang-una, nakakatulong to para hindi magbahay ang daga at ipis at para maiwasan nating mag-expire ang ating stocks. Okay, tapos sa ating stock room, whether it be freezer, fridge, or dry storage, yung shelf mo, yung unang shelf mo, dapat ang height niya from the floor is 6 inches. Yung unang shelf, 6 inches ang angat niya from the floor at 6 inches ang layo niya mula sa wall para makaikot ang hangin at para hindi magbahay ang mga daga. For everything dry, fridge, at saka freezer. Okay? Hindi ka pwedeng maglagay ng pagkain sa dating nilagyan ng chemicals. Pero pwede ka maglagay ng chemicals sa dating nilagyan ng pagkain. Basta ile-label mo lang. Okay, kaganito, naglipat siya ng bigas sa container. Make sure na yung container mo ay tight, walang nakakapasok ng hangin, at hindi dati nilagyan ng chemicals, and you have to label it. You have to label it very, very well. Okay. Kapag may tumulo, mga sauce or whatever, papahida natin, pupunasan natin kahit sa mga cart kasi yan ang unang naaamoy ng daga at ipis. Make sure wala silang mga tulo-tulo. Okay, pag magtatago tayo ng pagkain sa fridge o sa freezer, kailangan nakatakip. Plus, mas maganda yung cling wrap o yung plastic kaysa sa foil para nakikita mo yung nasa loob. Tapos meron tayong mga papel na nagsistick. Kakabitan mo yan. Ilalagay mo yung date, kailan siya nilagay, tsaka expiration date, at tsaka kung ano yung laman niya. Ngayon, meron tayong arrangement ng pagkain sa freezer. Okay, ito yung arrangement. Bakit inaayos natin ng ganito? Para kung tutulo yung juices nung nasa taas dun sa baba, ang tutuluan niya, class, mas mataas ang cooking temperature. So makikita nyo, ang pinakamababa, ang nilalagay natin sa pinakababa ng freezer ay poultry. Kasi siya yung pinakamataas ang cooking temperature. Sa itaas ng poultry, giniling na baka, at saka giniling na baboy, giniling na isda. Sa itaas ng giniling, mga buong karne, lalagay mo dyan. Buong baboy, buong baka. Tapos dun sa mas mataas pa, dun mo lalagay yung mga buong isda, dun mo lalagay yung mga hipon, alimango, dyan mo ilalagay lahat. Tapos sa pinakataas, dyan mo ilalagay ang ready to eat food. Yun yung mga hotdog, yung hindi masyadong niluluto na matagal, tsaka yung mga luto, if there's any. So pag tumulo ang dugo niyan o ang liquid niyan, ang babagsakan niya, mas mataas ang cooking temperature. So hindi pwedeng baliktad din. Okay, so make sure that to prevent cross-contamination, hindi rin tayo naglalagay ng mga pagkain sa sumusunod. sa loob ng restroom, sa mga mechanical room, sa ilalim ng hagdan, sa dressing room, at saka dun sa may mga linya ng sewer. Di tayo naglalagay ng pagkain doon. Okay. So this is the end of chapter 5. As you can see, tomorrow we have 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And these are very, very short topics. And we still have 3 videos for tomorrow. I forgot to show you this. So you know who I am. I was your teacher, I know. Teacher niyo ako. Pero ito yung credentials ko. Of course, I am your servsafe instructor. I'm a registered nutritionist and dietitian. And I am a food protection manager and food safety compliance officer. I have servsafe certification, which will expire next year. That's why I have to take another exam. So, accredited ako to give you lecture at saka yung exam. So, pag nakapasa na kayo sa exam, makakakuha kayo ng certificate na servsafe coming from the CIC, and it is accepted in the entire Philippines. Pero hindi siya accepted sa labas ng Pilipinas. Okay, so this was the first servsafe I received in 2008. This was after I graduated from CCA. Nag-last siya hanggang 2013, Food Protection Manager. Tapos 2013, nag-exam uli ako. Nag-last siya hanggang 2018. Tapos ako din ay servsafe examination proctor, but I have to renew it. And then I also finished food safety for food handlers in food shop in the Philippines, at saka HACCP, at saka food safety compliance officer. Plus, hindi ko yata nalagay dito yung servsafe certification ko ng 2018 up to 2023. Meron pa ako nun. So mag-expire siya next year. So I have to get a new one. Okay, I gave servsafe lectures to schools like Santa Isabel College in Manila, and also in a hospital in Manila, Justice Jose Abad Santos General Hospital, and CIC, of course. Okay, may tanong ba, class? Are there questions? Questions? Wala?
None, Chef.
Okay, so I am saying good afternoon. Malapit na mag-afternoon, magto-12 o'clock. To all of you, we will start the lecture at 7 tomorrow. Okay?
Okay,
Yes,
Chef.
Chef.
Okay, Chef.
Thank you, Chef.
Thank you, Chef.
Chef.
Kaya ko ng short review bukas tungkol sa temperatures. I-gather natin all together. I-review natin lahat ng temperature kasi maraming tanong doon. Okay?
Okay,
So
Chef.
Okay, Chef.
we will end the lecture tomorrow with a review. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, Chef.
Bye,
Thank you
Chef.
po.
Chef.
Thank you, Chef.
Thank you, Chef.